What is going on, guys? Today we're doing another reaction. We'll be doing Ibn Battuta, the Great Traveler by Extra History. We're doing his series, and on World War II, the D-Day. Um, and yeah, I'm a nerd, history guy. I've streamed some history games like Crusader Kings 3 on Twitch and post on YouTube too. So yeah, I think I've seen this video before. It's been a while. I do watch Extra History a lot. I haven't been watching their new videos because I wanted to. Yeah, let me just take these glasses off. I wanted to because I can't wear it with headphones on. I wanted to see like I wanted to react to them fresh without any knowledge before. Though it is a bit unfair to me because I'm watching Ibn Battuta and I have read about his life and his travels, which are very interesting. And yeah, I'll just shut up now and let's react.
June 23rd, 1325.
Let me lower the volume.
Tangier. A 21-year-old scholar, mounted on a donkey, leaves home for the first time. His objective, the holy city of Mecca. He expects to be gone for 2 years, possibly even 3. I set out alone, he wrote later, having neither fellow traveler in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor caravan whose part I might join, but swayed by an overmastering impulse within me, and a desire long cherished in my bosom, to visit these illustrious sanctuaries. So I braced my resolution to quit my dear ones, female and male, and forsook my home as birds forsake their nests. And he will not return home for another 24 years.
Damn, 24 years. That's crazy.
When Ibn Battuta left Tangier, he had no idea that he was commencing on a journey so epic, we'd still be talking about it 700 years later. And in his quarter century of wandering, he would end up seeing nearly the entire Muslim world of the 14th century, from the deserts of the Empire of Mali to the Islamic outposts of Indonesia and southern China. In doing so, he would travel.
This does include Empire of Mali. That's just where Ibn Battuta is from, Tangiers, which is I think modern day Morocco. Empire of Mali, he says desert of Mali, so it's like right under the Sahara Desert, a little bit in between, and yeah.
To the Islam.
I just want no confusion.
Islamic outposts of Indonesia and southern China. In doing so, he would travel around 75,000 miles, enough to circle the globe 3 times, meet 60 heads of state, and visit 40 modern countries. He would survive kidnapping and shipwreck, witness revolts and military campaigns, be imprisoned by a mad sultan, and encounter the horrors of the Black Plague. And when he finally returned, the ruler of Morocco asked him to spend 2 years dictating all he saw to a literary scholar. The resulting book, a gift to those who contemplate the wonders of cities and the marvels of traveling, a title often shortened to The Travels, is 1,000 pages long. Which is sort of a problem if, for example, you're adapting it into a series of 5 short animated videos. But in truth, even if we had 10 times the budget and development time for this series, we still wouldn't be able to do all of Ibn Battuta's travels justice. But what we can do, though, is look at the travels the way historians do today, as a way of understanding the breadth of Islamic religion and culture during the 14th century, how faith was adapted to local conditions, and the trade and travel links that could take a man from North Africa to China. And of course, we'll look at the curious, intrepid, and
the 14th century is a very interesting time for Islam, as it is in its crisis/dark age thing, like equivalent of the Roman Empire being invaded. Western Roman Empire being invaded by the Goths and Visigoths. A dark age, basically, sort of dark ages. This is where you see Ibn Taymiyyah pop up. I never pronounce his name right. Ghazali. I'm sorry. I'm a Muslim, but like whenever I read something, I always mispronounce it because I don't really read the Arabic version of their names.
Ambitious, and often quite prickly, man who experienced it all. Apart from what we learned from the travels, we actually know surprisingly little about Ibn Battuta himself. But we can be sure his formative years in Morocco were the perfect training for a great traveler. Tangier was not one of North Africa's great cities, but it was a massive trade hub. To the north lay Europe. To the south, the golden kingdoms of sub-Saharan Africa. To the east lay the Mediterranean trade networks, and to the west, the burgeoning Atlantic trade.
So, from what I can understand, Constantinople, which is right here, links trade between Europe and Asia. And I feel like Tangier or Gibraltar, which is also on the Spanish side, which Great Britain owns or the UK owns. I feel like those two areas are like equivalent of each other, except Constantinople was a holy site at the same time.
And its docks thronged with both Muslims and Christians, along with merchants from Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Ibn Battuta's family were scholars of Islamic law and gave their son an education that would let him follow in the family tradition. This education made him a qadi, a magistrate or judge of Islamic law. Not only an honorable profession, but one, it turned out, that would let him find work wherever there was a Muslim community. His education also likely instilled the curiosity that would drive him on his great journey. For in Islam, curiosity and the seeking of knowledge is considered a religious duty. In fact, a common saying at the time, seek knowledge even unto China, would really end up becoming...
That is fabricated. It was alleged that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, said, "Seek knowledge even if it brings you to China." It was made up. He never said that. Yeah.
Coming quite literal for this young man. But Ibn Battuta...
So if he was a Islamic jurist, he'd know that he's an Islamic jurist. So I'm pretty sure that he didn't think that was true too, because everyone knows that it's not true. Every Muslim knows.
His travel experience began by embarking on the Hajj, or annual pilgrimage to Mecca, a religious duty for all Muslim men if they had the resources, were healthy enough to do it, and their leaving wouldn't place a burden on their family. He set out alone at first, traveling east across North Africa, but soon joined up with a pilgrim caravan for protection against bandits. And they were happy to have him, as having a qadi among a caravan meant that disputes and matters of religious law could be solved without stopping the train. So they crossed the land of the slave sultans, the Mamluks, who had risen from being enslaved soldiers to taking over the state. And though he was not far from home, Ibn Battuta began to reveal what he would be like as a traveler. A fever hit him hard, the first of many on his journey. Soon, he was so ill he could barely stay on his mount. "If God decrees my death," he said, "then my death shall be on the road, with my face set toward Mecca." Determined not to stop, he tied himself to his saddle in order to keep going. But stop he did. And during that brief sojourn, he did a very Ibn Battuta thing. While recovering, he fell in love and formed a marriage contract.
Damn.
But then dissolved it before the ceremony after a dispute with the woman's father. But then shortly afterward, he would meet and marry another woman, the first of 10.
Damn.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He would marry
what's
10 women on his journey.
Hi, Javelin. Am I pronouncing it right, Javelin? What up? Welcome to my stream. Let me go back. Javelin, like the weapon. I'm watching Ibn Battuta, Extra History, The Great Traveler. It's like Muslim Marco Polo. Yeah, Muslim Marco Polo. That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Another woman, the first of 10. Oh, yeah, that's right. He would marry...
Oh, thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow. So for Muslims such as I am Muslim. Polygamy is allowed. You're allowed to marry more than one wife. Thanks. I just saw your message. No problem. And for the same things, you're allowed to only if you're allowed to are able to take care of them. You're allowed to marry them more than one wife. For example, you have to pay for whatever expenses they need, and you gotta shelter them, give them housing, whatever it is. That's how the conditions are. So it wasn't common to have more than one wife, believe it or not. You'd only see that with wealthy people or rulers.
10 women on his journey. Now, we don't know much about these marriages. He simply mentions them in passing, confirming the Islamic literary convention of keeping his private life private. And often, like with his first wife, he would divorce his wives when he moved on. A common practice in medieval Islam, and perhaps these divorces may even have been mutually agreed, since religious law made that the easiest route to ending a marriage. But here is where we get the first hint.
The ruling for divorce in Islam is that It's very easy to get a divorce, actually. But it's recommended. It's what we call disliked makruh. So it's a dislike to do a divorce, but it's very easy. You just have to. It's very it's very simple thing to do. But there's a condition that once you are divorced, you're supposed to live 3 months in your husband's former husband's house, while they pay you. And after those 3 months, then you can then they're like fully divorced. There's a whole process, according to like law. And right now, I'm doing it from Hanafi perspective, which is one of those schools, or madhabs, madhab means schools, um, and they say that. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it is. It is interesting. I study. I'm currently studying Islamic law and creed.
Of Ibn Battuta's lifelong fascination with women. Wherever he went, along with descriptions of food, agriculture, religious life, and court processions, he often remarked on how attractive he found the local ladies. He was also known to have innumerable lovers and concubines over his life, including several that were enslaved. And it's also at
Oh
this
my God.
point we get an early indicator.
Now, this is controversial, but slavery, you can't think slavery is the same in Islam as American slavery during, or European slavery, where you see African Americans being enslaved. Yeah, medieval Middle East. Well, you could say it's cool. Yeah, I'm very interested in that. But they would most slaves would be house slaves. They would do chores like basic chores and housekeeping, and there would be, and you're supposed to actually compensate them. You're supposed to pay for them, and it was basically like, how you should say this. It's like having, treating your kids as slaves, except, like making them do chores and all this stuff, until it's just that you keep on doing that forever. Slaves in Rome, that's a different story, because in Roman Empire, slaves, it depends what kind of slave you were. There are different kinds of slaves in the Roman Empire. Like gladiators were slaves. And there was a huge revolt actually for slaves. What was his name? Who was that famous guy? Roman slave revolt leader. Spartacus. Yeah, the ones that clean up stuff and teach. But there were a lot. There was loads of slaves. The only reason the Roman Empire was basically built on slaves. All the aqueducts, all that construction, slaves. Or artisans doing them, but most of the time you see it's slaves. Yeah.
Of his, well,
For Islam though, Middle East, golden age of Islam, slavery wasn't like that. You don't like whip them or anything. You can actually pay your way out of slavery. That was a practice too. Stuff like that.
let's just call it
It like indentured servants, you would call them. Indentured service. That's a good word to to describe what an Islamic slave was.
snippy nature. On a stop in Egypt, he visited the town bathhouse and was shocked to find the men inside were not wearing the hip coverings required by law. Basically, they were naked in the locker room. But now here's the thing about Ibn Battuta. He could get a bit judgy. And if he saw you doing something he considered wrong, oh, he was definitely telling the teacher. In fact, historians often refer to him as a busybody, for being all up in.
How do you end up in slavery in Islam, man? It depends. There's a lot of reasons. One of them is you capture in war. And also, you're supposed to treat your slaves right. Islamically, you're not a Muslim shouldn't be a slave. So if you become a Muslim, you're not a slave anymore. That's another thing. I think slavery in Islam. It recognizes slavery as a source of injustice. Freeing the slave is considered same level as feeding the poor, charity. It doesn't abolish it though. But how does one become a slave? Slave in Islamic Middle. I know one of them is through war and conquest. People would sell their children to slavery and stuff like that. This is the Roman Empire, but pre-Islamic. Oh, okay, so we're. Liberation by freemen of their own offspring born by slave mothers. Yeah, so basically, non-Muslims were the primary slaves. So, because I know for a fact that if you're a slave and you become Muslim, you should be set free. That's not always the case, but you should, according to Islamic law, or the Quran or the Sunnah. Quran, which the book of Islam. Sunnah is the teachings of the Prophet and the stuff you're supposed to do, and actions. And so it's usually Christians during the Crusades. Actually, the Third Crusade, they caught so many slaves. They caught so many crusaders. They sold them as slaves, so much so that the prices of slaves decreased by a lot.
In your business, but to put it in a more modern vernacular, Ibn Battuta was a total narc. So instead of just telling those guys to please cover up, he went straight to the local governor and started an official crackdown on proper dress in the bathhouses. Yeah, the phrase "that escalated quickly" was kind of his brand.
I mean, you could say he's a total narc for doing that and everything, but if for Islam especially, any violation is very, very, very like any violation in Islamic law and ruling doesn't like it's not like, oh yeah, you get forgiven like that. You do get forgiven if you ask for forgiveness and all that stuff, but to do it so freely is so like disliked against. And actually in our religion of Islam, we are against innovation in religion. So you can't change anything in the religion because we believe it's complete, it's perfect, it doesn't need to change. If you do change it, you're changing the religion. And if you believe in that change, then you're not a Muslim. Yeah, it is kind of easy to say I'm just Muslim now. I guess that has happened. But there is basic stuff like for example, you have the 5 pillars. If you don't do the 5 pillars, like profess your faith in Islam, pay your charity, pray your prayers 5 times a day, and do a pilgrimage and fast during Ramadan. I guess if a slave says this is I'm Muslim now and doesn't do any of that stuff, then they're like, oh, you're lying, put you back in slavery. I guess, I don't know. It just depends. I don't. Slavery is still not a really mainstream thing anymore, and I don't know if there's any cases of that happening. It could have happened, probably.
But while he often comes off as judgmental, his job was to be a judge. And this trip across North Africa offered him the opportunity to develop those skills. Because while he was fully qualified as a Qadi, the universities of Tangier were provincial when compared to those in Cairo, Damascus, and Alexandria. So as he made his way toward Mecca, he would stop to study for a few months under great teachers, gaining further certification.
Yeah, slavery, yeah. I mean, when I say mainstream, I mean... I mean to say, like, it's still happening. It's just that it's illegal and it's not widely done in any country. It's just that it's more happening in like Syria, where war is going on, Afghanistan, Yemen. You see that happening, but like it's not common. That's the word. When I say mainstream, it's not common. It used to be common. That's what I mean. I'm not trying to say anything.
He saw the great lighthouse of Alexandria, visited Cairo, which he called the mother of cities, passed by the Giza pyramids, and traveled down the Nile, but then was halted by a violent revolt. So he doubled back to Cairo and instead took the royal road to Damascus. Diverting for a moment to visit the tomb of Abraham, then the Muslim sites in Jerusalem, he finally made it to the Mamluks' second capital. But eager to move on, he only spent 24 days in Damascus, probably living in the dormitory of the Great Mosque. Though he did pack that 3 weeks full, managing to survive another illness, gaining further certifications, and celebrating
What? No, bro, this slavery thing is going out of fashion. I need to get slavery. What? I mean, there is other types of slavery, like corporate slavery. But that's like loose definition. I don't know. Corporate slavery, manual labor, such as immigrants go through when they first move to a new country, like America. They do things for mad cheap. A lot of work for mad cheap. A lot of hours.
weeks full, managing to survive another illness, gaining further certifications, and celebrating Ramadan. Oh, and of course, you know, he got married and divorced again. That's right, Zoe, because Ibn Battuta. And there he finally joined the official route of the Hajj, across a perilous desert route, haunted by epidemic disease, burning days, and freezing nights. And this time, Mamluk soldiers guarded them from bandits. Yet the caravan made it to its destination without incident, the city of Medina, where the Prophet Muhammad had retreated with his followers when driven out of Mecca. While there, he prayed at the Mosque of the Prophet, built over Muhammad's tomb, before continuing on. Then finally, upon reaching the holy city of Mecca, he took part in the rituals of the Hajj, making several circles around the Kaaba, bowing to the shrine of Abraham's footprints, standing on the plains before the Mount of Mercy.
I don't think you're supposed to bow down in the footprints of Abraham, or Ibrahim as we like to call him, but okay. Oh yeah, if you don't know, Muslims believe believe that Abraham and his wife well, I gotta start in the beginning, but sum it up, Abraham and his second son Ismail or Ishmael built the Kaaba, and not Lincoln, but Abraham. I'll call him Ibrahim because in Islam we call him Ibrahim. Ibrahim alayhi salam. Whenever every time a Muslim says a prophet's name or mentions a prophet, we're supposed to say alayhi salam or peace be upon him, and we believe he and his son built the Kaaba and to worship God, and we also believe that soon after they started the people living in that near the Kaaba, near that area, slowly started worshiping other gods, and then that rose to the advent of Islam, which destroyed all the gods and kept the Kaaba and made it the source of a holy site for Islam. So,
where the Prophet gave his farewell sermon, reciting prayers.
But like, how old is the Kaaba? Well, how long ago was Abraham? So, how old is the Kaaba? Didn't mean to do that. 5,000 years ago. Okay. Yeah, since Abraham built the Kaaba 5,000 years ago. So, that makes sense.
And listening to religious teachings for a full day. And of course, he studied, seeking always more knowledge. For this pilgrimage had merely whetted his appetite for seeing the world. Not to mention he had come across news that the Sultan of Delhi, immensely rich and generous, was in need of officials with proper certifications, which is why he was building his resume.
Oh, almost every empire in India or kingdom was immensely rich. They were crazy rich. If you look at the Mughals, when the British conquered Bengal and started conquering the rest of India, they got so rich from that because of the size of the Silk Road and the spices they sold and produced, the silk that would pass through them, all the goods. They had massive loads of gold and silver. They were very rich, immensely rich. It's crazy. It was said, like Bengal. GDP compared to British Empire. Nah, that's not what I was looking for. Oh yeah. That's actually a story on that. It has been built, like wrecked from natural disasters and rebuilt, but it hasn't been completely destroyed or anything like that. I guess I don't know. Maybe it has. There is a story saying the Prophet one time of weather conditions destroyed parts of the Kaaba and they need to renovate it and rebuild it. There has been renovations. Um, Thing is, we haven't like for every renovation they would use the same stones. That's why the stones are actually black, the bricks, because of how old they are. I don't know if all of them are the same ones, but I'm pretty sure there's some new ones. The shell with the old Kaaba inside, I'm not actually sure. Let's see. Renovations of the Kaaba. There is a story though about before the prophet, our prophet became the prophet, because he became a prophet at 40. He helped rebuild it. In 1631, the Kaaba and the surrounding mosque was completely entirely rebuilt after floods had demolished it the previous year. That's not. Let's see. Kaaba Wikipedia. Yeah, rebuilt throughout history. Most famously, Abraham and Ishmael. Architecture and interior. Made of stones. The floor is made of marble and limestone. Interior walls. Oh, it doesn't say anything, but I know it has been rebuilt a lot of times. So I guess there is no shell or anything like that, but I'm thinking that like the Kaaba was it was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt. Some of the stones I know for a fact that they tried using the most materials, the same materials that was on the Kaaba before. But if they can't, then they put new materials in to rebuild it. But they only rebuild it when it's damaged, actually damaged.
Fortune and adventure awaited in the east, and he decided to extend this 18-month trip a little bit longer. So Ibn Battuta turned his mount towards the lands of Muslim Persia and the devastated city of Baghdad. November 1320.
Yes. You pray at the Kaaba. I've been to Saudi Arabia to do that. I didn't do Hajj, the pilgrimage, main pilgrimage. I did Umrah, which is basically like the main pilgrimage, except like a down a notch, which is optional. They're both optional, but the other one is more more optional. And I prayed there. I've been there. I've seen it. I touched it because I went there twice, but I was really young, so I don't really remember the first time. But the second time it was 2016. So many people. I got run over by a wheelchair while walking around it. Yeah, every Muslim, billions of Muslims, every single Muslim, 5 times a day, pray the same direction towards the Kaaba. It used to be Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is, in Aqsa, but then they switched it to Mecca. That was the time when Islam became its own religion instead of being part of Judaism, which I don't know if you knew. It was considered to be part of Judaism at first.
26. Iraq, Il-Khanate. Ibn Battuta sits, waiting for the ritual to begin. At the appointed hour come the Sufi mystics. When the afternoon prayers had been said, drums were beaten, and the brethren began to dance, he wrote. They had prepared loads of firewood, which they kindled into flame, and went into the midst of it dancing. Some of them rolled in the fire, others ate it in their mouths, until they finally extinguished it.
This is not an Islamic thing. When I was talking about like innovation in religion, this was talking about if you introduce anything new to the religion of Islam, it's forbidden to do that.
Entirely. Some of them will take a large snake and bite its head with their teeth until they bit it clean through. This is Islam as Ibn Battuta has never seen it, and it will make a lasting impression.
Our prophet like forbade any types of new things added to the religion. Like you can't just change the religion, you know? He's like, I completed the religion for you. You cannot change it. You're not you'll be doomed. You'll be promised destruction. He didn't say that, but like I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but like it's forbidden to do it. Forbidden. It's a sin. What's this? Okay, I don't know what that means. I'll search that out. Copy. And what? Oh, let me search up. I don't know what that means, but at the latest prophet. Muslims believe that our prophet Muhammad was the last prophet, and we also say that every single prophet before him was sent to a region or certain people in order to guide them. So like for every country or nation, and he would send, and the last prophet Muhammad, our prophet, would be the one, instead of being a prophet to one nation or one region, it's to the whole world. That's why he's the last prophet. Who's the last prophet? You mean, right? Who's? Who's the last prophet? Well, for us, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, us Muslims believe he is the last prophet. We also say Jesus is the prophet too. He's the second to last.
When Ibn Battuta was in Egypt, two separate holy men prophesied that he would travel.
We call him Isa though, instead of Jesus.
Far to the east and settle in India. And that made a certain amount of sense. The Sultan of Delhi was actively searching for scholars and judges to
it's okay.
fill his bureaucracy, and paying them handsomely. So, when Ibn Battuta got done with his pilgrimage to Mecca, he decided to just keep going. Because not only was he seeing the world, he was making a profit doing it. You see, on his journey, he'd found that rulers often gave pilgrims lavish gifts, and a young Qadi got even more spectacular rewards. He'd heard that the further he got from the Islamic core of the Arabian Peninsula, the more generously a young scholar would be rewarded.
Damn.
Therefore,
I could see why you get more money for being a scholar and more farther you get away from the core of Islam, because then you see less Islam. You see countries where Muslims are not there's a significant amount of non-Muslims, such as India. There's a lot of Hindus, so Islamic rulers in India would want scholars to help them, so they'd pay significant amounts of money. Plus, rulers in India were mad rich.
he made a vow to keep traveling, to see as much of the world as possible, and to never take the same route if he could avoid it. His eventual goal was India, but he might as well have some fun and make some money on his way there. After all, he might spend the rest of his life in India and never get another chance to see this part of the world. So he began his gap year of travel, joining a Persian caravan and crossing out of Mamluk territory, trekking for 44 days into Mesopotamia, into the land of the Khans. A century before, the Mongols had swept into Persia and Iraq, devastating what were, until then, some of the most impressive and advanced cities of the Islamic world. And when Genghis Khan died, his empire split among his 4 descendants, leaving Persia under a Mongol ruler. But in the century since then, the Mongols had converted to Islam and were now patrons of religion and learning. Still, as Ibn Battuta passed through the once mighty city of Baghdad and ruined sites formerly renowned for beauty and scholarship, he reflected on the passing of empires. And he began to realize another thing. He was now truly abroad. His previous travels had taken him to new places, but this was different. As he left the Arabian Peninsula, he ventured into lands that were still religiously Muslim, but had underlying cultures increasingly divergent from his own.
I like to say the saying, tradition is against religion, because cultural traditions usually, especially in Islam, which goes against some religious ideas, and if a certain people mix culture and traditions with religion and saying it's part of religion too, it should be cut out. Like Islam is really against any kind of innovation or new things in the religion. They don't want to be like, corrupted.
Many of the rulers and court figures out here, the people he associated with most, were relatively new converts, second and third generation Muslims, some even first. And their practices at times varied from what Ibn Battuta considered the norm. He was about to see Islam in all of its many forms. And that exploration began during his first encounter with Sufi Mysticism, a sect that used trance, ritual movement, and chanting as a way to experience.
You're not allowed to dance. I mean, you're not allowed to listen to music or really dance in Islam. So this is like
God's love on an emotional level, rather than the intellectual manner in which
Sufis are kind of like looked down upon because they don't really practice a lot of Islamic rules, like a lot of Islamic rules. So they're considered somewhat deviants. It depends though. There's levels of Sufism, like how far astray you go.
Which Ibn Battuta was accustomed. The same year, he got to meet the Il Khan himself, joining the royal caravan, traveling along the Silk Road to see the capital of Khanate. On the way, he visited with the Great Khan, seeing firsthand how the Mongol invaders had become assimilated into Persian culture. Far from a fierce steppe raider, this Khan was a just ruler, a handsome, observant Muslim who played the lute and composed poems in both Persian.
The only music you can play in Islam is actually a one-sided drum. The only instrument you can play, any wind instruments is forbidden. So piano you can't play, flute you can't play, guitar you can't play. So yeah, the only one-sided drum. And you're allowed to sing, but it must mention the name of it has to be a religious song. Both. A Muslim is Islam means to submission. So a Muslim is what a loose definition, like not literal definition, because Muslim means submitter, and we're submitting to God, so we can't obey God's intent, a rule, and everything. So for Muslim, we're really strict. Like we're really strict about following these rules. There are things that you could do, and you could do it's fine, but some things are just like you can't do it, and some people still, even Muslims, still do them. Like music, some music. There are certain restrictions, and if you don't follow the restrictions, then it's sinful. But as you can see,
Persian and Arabic, his kingdom was mighty and powerful. Ibn Battuta did not know it then, but when he next passed through 11 years later, the mighty Ilkhanate would be no more.
No.
Its ravaged landscape filled with warfare and death. But that's in the future. Now, he bade the Sultan farewell and reached the Khan's capital.
So Muslim also is a group of people. Nope. Western songs is actually, if you go to mosques or Muslim temples, like mosques, masjids, they sometimes go at it, be like, hey, you're not allowed to listen to Western music. And not every Muslim likes nasheed, so Islamic music. So Muslims religious Muslims tend to not listen to music at all. Nasheeds are Islamic music, so Islamic music is like disliked. It's not disliked, more like it's cringy. Like a lot of it's cringy, so if some people like it, a lot of Muslims like it. I think it's cringe.
Exploring its enclave be no more. Its ravaged landscape filled with warfare and death. But that's in the future. Now, he bade the Sultan farewell and reached the Khan's capital, exploring its enclaves of Venetian, Genoese, Arab, and Chinese merchants before touring the Euphrates and then heading back to Baghdad. But it was time to get on to India. His gap year of religious tourism was coming to an end. But first, a side trip back to Mecca to make the Hajj pilgrimage again, because who knew if he'd ever get another chance? Yet that took longer than expected. He'd overextended himself a bit. In 1 year, Ibn Battuta had traveled 4,000 miles, and when he finally arrived back in Mecca, he was so exhausted and ill that after the Hajj, he took a full year to study, pray, and recover. But after that, it was off to Delhi. He went south to the Red Sea, traveling by ship until he was blown off course and became too seasick, so he had to continue his travels on land, often walking across the mountains of Yemen. But eventually, he made it to southern Arabia, where Muslim ports controlled the Indian Ocean trade, where he could get on another ship to India and settle down at a real job. But first, a side trip. I mean, because Africa was right there. And look, he might never get back this way again. So he jumped on a ship and went on a port hopping tour of East Africa, visiting the Christian kingdom of Ethiopia, as well as the Muslim courts of Mogadishu, Mombasa, and Zanzibar. There, he saw how Muslim merchants had.
Ethiopia has a special place for Muslims, as when early Islam, when Muslims were being prosecuted for their religion, before going to Medina, they would be a refugee going to Abyssinia or modern day Ethiopia. So Muslims have respect for Ethiopia for their religious tolerance
Settled into the
at the
ports,
time.
converting locals and intermarrying into African families, their languages blending to create what we now know as Swahili.
Yeah, Swahili is the combination of. Yeah, bro's just traveling. Yeah, he goes crazy. He's literally the Muslim Marco Polo. Swahili is a combination of local African languages mixed in with Arabic.
He saw the African section of the vast Indian Ocean trade, with merchants loading vast quantities of gold, ivory, spices, and perfume ingredients into their triangle-rigged ships, along with enslaved Africans captured from kingdoms further inland. And in these port towns, Ibn Battuta first saw societies where Muslims were the minority, where the elites and rulers didn't share a religious tie to the majority of their populations. But these were no frontier ports. They were cities, whose rulers lived in palaces with indoor plumbing. Elites dressed in silk and Adolf porcelain, both imports from China. He saw great mosques and mansions carved from coral, mixed cultures formed from Islam's economic dominance of the maritime networks. But again, his time was running short, the monsoon winds changing and blowing back north. So he hopped on a ship back to the Arabian Peninsula, where he could finally travel on to India. But when he arrived on the southern coast of Arabia, he realized it would be cool to see the Gulf of Oman, though that was a bit of a disaster.
Weirdest rule of Islam in Islam? What is the weirdest rule in Islam? I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's some unexplained rules that don't get talked about because sometimes the Prophet would say, "Don't dye your hair black, or else you won't even get into heaven, or you won't even have a taste or smell of heaven." And everyone just followed him. No explanation in there. So there are things like that, but I want to say it's really weird. So let me see. Rule in Islam, I guess. Woman banning from using emojis? Nah, that's not. That's modern. No strange laws. I don't know. Wait, hold up. Someone's calling me. Be right back. I'm back. Okay, I had a call. I had a call from my dad. Gonna go see you while there. Thanks. Thanks for stopping by, checking out my stream. Continue on with the video.
Their guide tried to rob and murder him, and Ibn Battuta only escaped after fending the man off with a spear. He reached the Gulf dehydrated.
Wait, what did I miss?
Though that was a bit of a disaster. Their guide tried to rob and murder him, and Ibn Battuta only escaped after fending the man off with a spear. He reached the Gulf dehydrated, half dead from illness, and feet bleeding from the trip.
Damn.
It was a close call, and probably an indication that now it was really time to head to Delhi. Become established. But first, a side trip.
Oh my
Back to
God.
Mecca for the Hajj for a third time. After another year of study and rest, Ibn Battuta was finally ready for India. For real this time. He'd buffed his resume with qualifications, could tell stories of far-flung places, and had built up a tidy profit in gifts. But the trip itself would be treacherous, and to get there, he needed a guide. And he couldn't find one. Okay, no problem, because everyone knew that the Turkish Silk Road caravans linked Anatolia with India, and if you joined them, you'd get there eventually. Sure, there were more direct routes, but he'd seen that stuff already. He went to Cairo and met up with a traveling buddy, and reunited, the two stepped onto a Genoese galley and made for Anatolia. And in this land, whose urban centers contained neighborhoods of minority Christians, Jews, and Greeks, and where nomadic herders traveled the wild hillsides, they gave him a warm welcome. This country is one of the finest in the world, he wrote. In it, God has brought together the good things dispersed throughout other lands. Its people are the most comely of men, the cleanest in their dress, the most delicious in their food, and the kindliest folk in creation. Wherever we stopped in this land, whether it a hospice or a private house, our neighbors came to ask after our needs. When we left, they bade us farewell as though they were our relatives. He also saw one city execute people by firing them off a cliff with a catapult, but
That's
overall,
sick.
the people were really nice.
That's sick. If I want to be, imprisoned or executed for a rule or something that I broke the law, and if I'm going to, I'm like, yo, this is how I want to go.
Interestingly,
That's
he
funny.
found differences in their religious practice. Though observant Muslims, they chewed intoxicating drugs and did not veil women. In fact, Turkish society surprised him when he found out how high a status women had. Now further weighed down with Turkish gifts, he pushed north toward the Silk Road, down the rapids of swollen...
For Muslims, you're not allowed to drink anything that's intoxicating or can slur up your words. You can't even pray if you're intoxicated or you were intoxicated, so sober up. So no alcohol, no drugs like LSD and marijuana and all this stuff. Yeah, and all those kind of drugs. So yeah, coffee isn't. It was thought to be an intoxication at first, but it wasn't. It just kept you energetic, so that's not forbidden. There was a whole coffee culture at one point. I think extra history actually does that. Yeah, we should look at that
rivers,
after.
nearly freezing to death in the wilderness, avoiding bandits and thieves. But he made it to the Black Sea and boarded a ship for an even stranger place. One of nomads and horsemen, the land of the Golden Horde.
Golden Horde.
But first, a side trip.
No way. Another side
Special
trip?
thanks
That's crazy. Ibn Battuta.
May 1332, the Caucasus. Ibn Battuta and his wagon train have pitched their tents on a hill, waiting to see sight of the royal caravan they wish to join. His train full of servants, enslaved people, and concubines has been waiting a long time. Then, dust on the horizon. We saw a vast city on the move, he wrote, with its inhabitants, with mosques and bazaars in it, the smokes of the kitchens rising in the air, for they cook while they march, and horse-drawn wagons transporting the people. He descends to meet Ozbek Khan, ruler of the Golden Horde.
Uzbek? This is like Uzbek.
When Ibn Battuta crossed the Black Sea and landed in Crimea, he'd soon realized he'd crossed into another world. Though the Khanate's state religion was Islam, the more European provinces of the empire were thoroughly Christian, filled with Russians and Ukrainians. And that meant red-haired people with blue eyes, who ate pork.
Yeah, Crimea and a lot of the eastern part of Russia was predominantly Muslim at this time, with significant Christian minorities.
And made evil
But the more east you go, it was more Muslim.
noises by ringing their church bells, a sound that terrified Ibn Battuta. But he soon passed out of the infidel lands and entered the steppe, traveling for the first time by wagon rather than horse or camelback, joining a Mongol caravan in order to find the Khan and link up with the Silk Road to India. And he found much to like about the hardy and competent Mongols, but also much that shocked him. Even the observant Muslims drank alcohol, for instance, arguing that the Quran forbade wine and wheat beer, but not millet beer or...
Innovation is strictly against the religion. So when things like that happen, you get that kind of reaction.
Fermented mare's milk. Ah, sweet, delicious loopholes. These differences came...
Yeah, the Prophet says that when he talks about innovations, he also talks about loopholes. There can't be loopholes. So if you're thinking you're smart by doing a loophole, by such as that one example, you'll be punished for it as like as you're doing it. And I think you get actually extra punishment because you're thinking like that. Because you're trying to trick God.
Relief when he met Ozbek Khan, entering his huge gold-tiled tent and finding the ruler sitting on a silver throne, flanked by 4 unveiled wives. In fact, he was soon to learn that the Khan consulted his wives on matters of state, in public, and that upon entering a tent, it was the Khan that stood until his wives were seated. Mongol society often treated women as near equals, and powerful women held a position higher than less powerful men. This was very different from his native Morocco, where a leader's wives might privately wield influence, but were never seen in public.
Yeah, that's not against Islam, though. I don't know, that's not an innovation.
Ibn Battuta spent Ramadan...
That's just culture that doesn't involve in self-religion, because the Prophet is like only against innovation in religion. So when it comes to religious practices and everything, that's the strict part.
With the Khan, visiting and conversing with his wives, and becoming particularly close with the youngest,
no.
Princess Bayalan, whom he shared much in common.
Oh no.
For she too was far from home and adrift in a strange culture. The daughter of the Byzantine emperor, given away in a political marriage. Ibn Battuta sympathized, but for different reasons. While he liked the Khan, who was a generous and able ruler, he disliked how the man drank, even showing up for afternoon prayer one day, stumbling drunk.
You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Nearly incomprehensible. But as a point of etiquette, after all of the gifts...
There's the story. Islam used to allow a little bit of alcohol, like you take like small sips and everything, until one time someone was having a drink party, and right after they had to pray, and the guy slurred up his words. Then when everyone found out, like, okay, that's it, we're forbidding Islam. Like, and they would destroy all their wine and alcohol, pour down streets and everything. Yeah, they would immediately destroy that.
Hospitality.
So it used to be allowed until someone messed up.
The Khan had bestowed upon him. He really couldn't just drop the mic and bail on his latest patron. So instead, he asked the Khan if he could take, you guessed it, a side trip.
No.
Because Princess Bayalan was pregnant and got permission to have their baby at home in Constantinople. So, Ibn Battuta requested to accompany her, as it was the perfect opportunity to take said side trip, not just in safety, but in style. The request granted, Ibn Battuta set out with the princess's caravan, doubling back to the city of the Byzantines, seeing the Hagia Sophia and meeting the emperor, marveling at the city's relative religious tolerance, and touring the Golden Horn. But there was a bit of a problem. See, on the way back home, Princess Bayalan had started throwing off the facade of Islamic conversion, and now it was clear that she wasn't coming home. This had been an escape plan. So Ibn Battuta had to turn around with the royal caravan, retrace his steps, and inform the Khan. Except now, it was winter on the steppe, and Ibn Battuta, a Moroccan, was not used to snow. It was so cold that they traveled along frozen rivers as if they were roads.
Damn.
So cold that when he washed his face with hot water, it froze in his beard. So cold that he wore 3 fur coats and so many layers of clothing underneath that he had to be helped into the saddle. But they made it to the capital of the Khanate, and after presumably telling the Khan about his wife, because he never actually mentions the reaction, Ibn Battuta joined the trade caravans toward India.
I don't think
this
he wanted
was some of the hardest traveling of his...
I don't think he wanted to, record what the reaction was. Maybe it's a touchy subject,
career, through mountains and dry country, and his recollections of it are confused and non-specific. In 8 months of relentless travel, he met the Khan of Chagatai, had a daughter, and finally crossed through the Khyber Pass into India.
Just casually says had a daughter. Okay. Khan of Chagatai. That's where I'm from. That's Uzbekistan. Chagatai. The Uzbek language used to be called Chagatai. Then it changed and modernized.
They had to spread blankets in front of the camels so their feet would not sink in the deep snow. The Indian border authorities met him as he crossed into India, questioning him about his intentions and qualifications, and telling him that should he wish to work for the Sultan, he must agree never to leave India except on official business. He agreed and signed a contract.
Damn.
Then, he took out a loan to buy the Sultan an appropriate gift of horses, gold, and enslaved people, knowing the custom was to be granted an even larger gift in return. Yeah, he hadn't gone gold digging across 3 continents without learning.
When they say loan, there's a certain type of loan they can only get in Islam because riba or interest is forbidden in Islam. Another thing that's forbidden. So you're not allowed to benefit from interest, and you're not allowed to participate or anything to do with interest. So banks would, if for example, if you're Muslim and you couldn't afford a house and you wanted a mortgage on the house, they would go to an Islamic bank, and the person with all the money they have, and the bank would buy the house, and over time the person would pay the bank to buy more of the house. So basically, a house was $10, let's say. You only have $3, and the bank offers to pay $7 of it. You buy it, and you technically own 30%, and they own 70%. And the next year you pay $1, so now you get 4% of it, and continue until you fully own it. And that's how. And it's nothing is an interest. I don't know how the banks make money on it. I think they just charge a fee or something. I forgot.
And how this stuff worked.
But it's like not increasing or anything.
When the party arrived, Ibn Battuta was
Welcome back, Javelin. Welcome back.
overawed. The Sultan's wooden palace, known as the Hall of 1,000 Pillars, was one of the largest structures he'd ever seen. Could it be that the rumors of the Sultan's splendor and generosity were not an exaggeration? Well, unfortunately, it would be a while before Ibn Battuta found out, because Muhammad Tughlaq, the Sultan of Delhi, was out crushing a rebellion. But in his absence, the Sultan's vizier accepted the gift and gave Ibn Battuta silk robes, a house, the tax revenue of 2 villages, which is 5,000 silver dinars a year for those of you keeping score at home, plus another 2,000 dinars as a starting.
Yeah. There's some things you missed. I was just talking about how interest is forbidden in Islam. You're not allowed to participate or gain anything from interest, participate in interest, and loans, and how I was talking about financial stuff, how to buy houses, mortgages in Islam, and how it's different. Do you want me to explain again? Because kind of don't want to.
Bonus. Ibn Battuta was floored. He was already part of Delhi's landed aristocracy, and he hadn't even been given a job yet. Then, things got even wilder, because the Sultan returned to Delhi in triumph, riding to the palace on a war elephant, the first in a great procession of armored beasts, and on the back of each elephant was a huge basket of treasure and a catapult. Entranced, Ibn Battuta watched his men shoveled gold and silver coins into the machines and fired the treasure out into the celebrating crowd. And that's when it hit Ibn Battuta. This was a dream job. Coming here was a great idea. And this was only reinforced when he met the Sultan. And Muhammad Tughlaq liked the Moroccans so much that he made Ibn Battuta the Qadi of Delhi.
Wow.
And at this point, even Ibn Battuta was like, thank you? But maybe that's too much. I mean, except for being a Qadi on a caravan, I never had a real job or tried a case. In fact, your religious law here is a bit different than the type I studied. Not to mention your court language is Persian, which I don't really speak well, so
when he said his religious law is not the one he studied, it's because there's 4 schools of religious law, and in India they have a different set than he does in Morocco. Let me see, actually. If you go to Ibn Battuta. Wait, what madhab was Ibn Battuta? Maliki, yeah, I had a feeling because most of North African is Maliki madhab. For my Muslims out there, who's gonna watch this on YouTube, he was a Maliki. I don't even. It's one of the four madhabs. That's all you need to know. There's four schools in Islam on law, only law. There's no religious schools. They're just saying how to. For example, when you look at the Constitution of the United States, there is certain freedoms and certain things in the Constitution, and some follow strictly, some interpret it different ways. Similar to that, it's like laws, basically Islamic laws based on Islam, and there's four schools. Yep, it is cool. I'm actually studying one of them, and he is and it's usually for Islam it's divided in regions, not purposely. It was just naturally happened. So for example, if you go to North Africa, they study one. They usually have one school, and in India they study one of the four schools that wasn't his. So naturally, those don't usually match.
Maybe we just let me work my way up? Huh?
Just interpretation. So, for example, one time the Prophet was praying, and one of his wives. One time the Prophet was praying, and a piece of wood fell on his head, and it caused him to bleed. And there was like a piece of wood in there, stuck in there, and so and this happened while he was praying, and one of his wives took the piece out, and when she took the piece out, he broke his prayer and cleaned up the wound. And one school says, oh, he broke the prayer because a woman touched him while he was praying, or another school says that no, he broke his prayer because he was bleeding too much, and like those different interpretations, and we never say they're wrong because they're based on concrete proofs and evidence. They're just interpretations. You can follow any of both of them.
The Sultan told him not to worry. Assigned two deputies to do.
Oh, and one madhab would say, one school would say it's both of those things too. How do you choose which one to follow? That is a debated topic. So, for schools, you're usually raised if you're born a Muslim, you're usually raised to one school. If you become a Muslim, you go to your local mosque and you learn about that, because it happens like the law is basically like implementation of religious practices, fiqh, and you don't realize it that you're doing it. So you don't study. There's some people who study it, like study a bunch of hypothetical situations and the insight into it. But usually for an average Muslim, they would learn it from their local mosque, and you decide from there. And you don't have to choose one if you just want to really learn. Like for people who want to be scholars, like him, Qadi.
The real work and doubled his salary. Unusual.
It's like having a philosophy. You can have your own philosophy, but if you want to really know about philosophy, you learn to become a philosopher, and then you choose whether you want to have your own philosophy or you want to follow the path of other philosophies.
Undoubtedly. But Ibn Battuta was about to find out that the Sultan of Delhi was a bit of an eccentric. You know, an unorthodox visionary. Some referred to him as mad. Early in his reign, he'd experimented with issuing copper coins backed by gold, but that scheme fell apart when Chinese traders wouldn't accept them. Then, he decided to found a new capital and move his court to central India. And when the elites resisted, he used troops to force them.
Damn.
That too collapsed. And now, fearing the entrenched power blocks of the elites that hated him, the Sultan was hiring any foreigners that showed up so that they would be personally loyal to him. Which was good, at least for Ibn Battuta. He became close with the Sultan, observing as the monarch a religious scholar in his own right, invited Hindu and Jain holy men into the palace for religious debates. He even accompanied the monarch on military campaigns. At one point, the Sultan brought Ibn Battuta to see the Hindu yogis perform tricks, like climbing a levitated rope, a performance that terrified the devout young scholar. But being a favorite was a financial problem.
More money, more problems. But, yeah, we do believe in magic. Not the type you think of, but, like, we do believe that magic exists and it's forbidden.
Keeping up with the Sultan's lifestyle, the extravagant hunting trips, the constant gift-giving, and hosting officials at his house actually put Ibn Battuta into debt.
Damn.
So that was problem number one. Problem number two, was that the Sultan was a psychopath.
Yeah.
Even Ibn Battuta, who often flattered his patrons, wrote, "The Sultan was far too free in shedding blood. He used to punish small faults and great without respect of persons, whether they men of learning or piety or noble descent. Every day there are brought to the audience hall hundreds of people, chained, pinioned, and fettered, and they are executed, tortured, or beaten. Muhammad Tughlaq killed advisors for disagreeing with him. He tortured holy men who refused to come to the palace.
Dang.
Particularly, he liked dropping red-hot squares of metal on victims' chests and ripping them off. And if he really hated someone, he..."
Oh. Ooh. Oh, that is painful. Never heard of that book. Something book is like the Islamic dark magic book, and bad things happen if you read it. Never heard of that. There is no like anti book for it. They like the magic. Well, we believe it's magic, but I believe it's magic too. Would the like minimum would it cause is like make your eyes like really itchy for constantly, or causing someone to get divorced. There's no like, I don't know, turn you into a frog kind of thing. You don't see any of that kind of magic. You just see like things that would cause something that God wouldn't like divorces. God doesn't like divorces. Causing people to stray away from Islam, stuff like that.
he'd throw them to his
Basically doing the devil's job for them, you know?
trained execution elephants, who would use the swords affixed to their tusks to play catch with the unfortunate victim.
Damn.
And perhaps that's when it hit Ibn Battuta. Coming here was a terrible idea. He began plotting his escape. Legendary thanks to 1340, Delhi. For 6 years, Ibn Battuta has served as a
6 years, wow.
Qadi for the Sultan of Delhi. But now he's under house arrest, awaiting execution. His friendship with a Sufi mystic had put him on the wrong side of the court. Ibn Battuta's friend had offended the Sultan by refusing a royal summons and calling the ruler a tyrant.
Damn.
In response,
That
the
is true, though.
Sultan tortured the mystic to death and arrested
That's just painful. Painful, I tell you.
all of his associates. For 9 days, Ibn Battuta prays and recites the Quran from memory. Then, the Sultan beckons. Ibn Battuta goes expecting to die.
Oh yeah, for Muslims, when you pray, you're supposed to recite Quran, which you memorize. There are people who memorize the whole Quran. The Quran is the Bible basically the Bible, the book of the religion, except it's the word of God, not the word of our prophet. That's a different book. And yeah, it's very very knowledgeable people. Oh shoot! Very knowledgeable people memorize the whole Quran. It was a book that will tell you how to summon jinns. Jinns in Islam, it's not like they're devils. We think of jinns as other beings that are similar to humans. There's Muslim jinns, there's Christian jinns, there's Jewish jinns. So there are good jinns. How to summon jinns stuff, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's part of magic too. It's just that it's not that common because I guess, it's very hard to learn or find, I guess. But there is no book of that. Maybe there is, but there's no it's just not mentioned anywhere. I think it's something, I don't know. Yeah, jinns are they're really a really hard subject to learn because not very much is known about them, but also a lot of things are known about them. It's a little bit like mixed information, and you can't tell which is true. So when it comes to jinns in Islam, It's very diverse. There's jinns that follow, which we call shayateen, follow the devil. There's the main devil guy, who's also a jinn. Um, yeah, and they are the ones who cause havoc and cause people to disbelieve or commit sins.
But
But there are Muslim jinn.
and the Sultan behaves like they're old friends, and everything's normal, as if he hasn't spent days preparing for death. Oh, it's at this point.
Usually, it was super. I heard on Reddit because. I mean, I feel like it is Bullocks because I don't know Reddit. You got it from Reddit, my guy. What are you gonna expect? Let's see. Satanic verses. Published in 1988. Huh? Is this what you're talking about? I don't know. You said Reddit, right? So Reddit, evil books in Islam, I guess. Huh? What am I reading? Also, join my subreddit. Just putting that in there. Okay, I guess it can't be reached. But there is no thing. Let me. You can just send my. Okay, if you find it, send me the link because it sounds BS to me, to be honest. Because there is no thing about it. Yeah, there's no like main book of magic we're against. There's no like. There's an Antichrist for us, Dajjal, but we don't call him Antichrist because we don't believe that Jesus Christ. We believe he was a prophet, but he wasn't like, you know,
Ibn
God, son of
Battuta
God.
realizes one thing. He's got to escape Delhi. Right as Ibn Battuta had arrived in Delhi, India entered a 7-year drought, which in turn caused a famine, which in turn triggered uprisings. Lots of uprisings.
It's the
In
economy.
fact, Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq would face 22 rebellions during his last 15 years in power. Hindus revolted against taxes, Indian Muslims rose against the foreign advisors, governors declared independence or hatched assassination plots. And Muhammad Tughlaq's paranoia went into overdrive.
Damn.
Ibn Battuta tried to tough it out, but after his brief imprisonment, he decided he had enough. And while the contract he'd signed meant he couldn't leave India, there was a loophole. He could go into religious retreat. So Ibn Battuta, court official and rich man, took the only escape hatch he could. He gave up all of his possessions, declared himself an ascetic, and lived in a cave. It was something he'd actually felt called to for years. Ever since he first began to encounter Islamic hermits, he'd wondered if that would be his path. Now, he learned to meditate.
I feel like the origin of that would be that the prophet, before he became a prophet, would used to meditate in mountains, reflecting on life and everything. Because this is before he became a prophet and was revealed, so he wasn't really what we would call a Muslim, because he's trying to find the right religion, I guess.
To live with nothing, fasting for 40 days at a time. But 5 months later, a summons came from the Sultan. He wanted Ibn Battuta back at court.
Baby, come
and
back.
Ibn Battuta accepted. Partially because the Sultan killed anyone who refused, and partially because the offer came with a gift of gold, robes, horses, and enslaved people that
Damn.
restored all Ibn Battuta had given up, plus some. However, Ibn Battuta, rich again, went to court with a plan. He would get permission to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, and then just never come back. Huh? But the Sultan had his own idea. He needed an ambassador to visit the Yuan Emperor and deliver an enormous train of gifts.
Yuan Emperor, so basically Mongol China.
Would Ibn Battuta, famous traveler, want to go to China in style? He did not have to ask twice. But travel was dangerous in the unstable empire. And on the way to the coast, rebels ambushed the train.
Damn.
In the conflict, Ibn Battuta was separated from the diplomatic train, carrying all he owned, and was chased into the country. About to be captured, he was forced to lose his pursuers by ditching his horse and hiding while they followed his previous steed.
Damn.
A few days before, he'd been one of the richest men in Delhi. Now, he was alone in enemy country with only his sword, boots, jewelry, clothes, and will to live.
Damn.
Then he promptly ran into rebels who captured him, took said sword and jewels, and handed him over for execution. But Ibn Battuta still had his clothes, boots, and will to live. So, he negotiated his release by giving his would-be executioners his fine tunic. Free again, he wandered the countryside, evading rebels and living by his wits for a week, with nothing now but his shirt, pants, boots, and still a will to live.
Shams al-Ma'arif? Never heard of that. Sounds like BS. Let's see if it's BS. Because never heard of that book. A 13th century grimoire written on Arabic magic and a manual for achieving esoteric spirituality. It was written by Arab scholar Ahmad al-Buni, who wrote it while during Ayyubid Egypt. It's regarded as the most influential textbook of this type in the Arabic world. 2 volumes. It introduced the reader to magic squares and combination of numbers and alphabet that are believed to bring magic effect, which the author insists is the only way to convene with the angels and spirits. The table of contents that were introduced later printed to contain the number of the blah blah blah, while being part of a reputation for being suppressed and banned for much of Islamic history. What? I mean, it's about magic, but oh, I've seen this before. Not personally, but in movies talking about jinns. Ooh, jinns. But yeah, I would say. I mean, it's instructions, yeah, but it's a BS book. Probably doesn't work because it's not official.
Then eventually,
the guy's pretty much unknown. I feel like it's just a hocus pocus book, you know? Be like, hey, it's like getting a Harry Potter one and be like, hey, Christians, fear me, I am a wizard or witch.
starving, he stumbled into a town to beg for food and promptly got robbed for his shirt. But he wouldn't quit. He still had his pants and his boots, and you know what? Wait, scratch that. At this point, he'd actually lost one boot trying to draw water out of the well. So, yeah. It was at this one booted point when he lost his will to live. But then, a miracle. Amidst this land of Hindu rebels, a Muslim man found him, fed him, and took him upon his back to bring him to safety. And all the while, Ibn Battuta recited the Quran until, exhausted, he passed out. When he awoke, he was in a friendly town and found out that the rest of his diplomatic mission was just 6 miles away, and very surprised to find him alive.
Oh, wow.
And they still had all of his baggage and servants. He was rich again. Rejoining the group, they traveled to Calicut, a major port city where they could meet up with Chinese junks. These ships, enormous compared to the dhows Ibn Battuta traveled on, were Chinese-built, but crewed by Muslims in the India-China trade. He marveled at their 5 decks, and most of all, their large private cabins with their own lavatories. However, for this voyage, Chinese merchants and the other court diplomats had reserved all of those rooms, leaving Ibn Battuta with a smaller, toiletless cabin. That was no big deal, though. Ibn Battuta had learned humility after all. He'd lived in a cave, and just days before, he only had one shoe. He wouldn't quibble over a slightly smaller cabin. Wait, what's that? Oh, right, yeah. He threw a fit. How dare they dishonor the Sultan's ambassador by giving him worse accommodations than common merchants and lesser diplomats? Ridiculous.
That's funny. But what's it called? So this is common for its time, because when you send an ambassador, they represent the country and the ruler. So you have to treat them with respect, or else that's it, you know. So at that time, you had to treat them with respect. For medieval times, you had to treat them with respect. Respect them.
After essentially wanting to speak to their manager, the ship's agent, a Syrian, managed to smooth things over by securing a comparable stateroom on the fleet's second, slightly smaller ship.
Oh.
This mollified the prickly ambassador, and Ibn Battuta loaded all of his possessions and entourage into the second ship. The night before the voyage, he stayed on shore to pray, and suddenly a storm blew up.
Oh no.
One bad enough that the two vessels had to put to sea, leaving him ashore, again with nothing but the clothes on his back. As he
That luck though. Oh my god.
watched from the shore, the vessel he was supposed to be on wrecked, killing everyone aboard.
Oh.
And the second ship, carrying all that he owned, blew so far out to sea that they decided to continue to China without him. He was stranded and poor again. And now he'd lost all of the Sultan's splendid gifts for the emperor.
Damn.
So he really didn't.
I mean, yeah, but it's more up and down. That we do believe in a thing called Qadr, which is destiny of Allah. So we believe that humans have free will, but also everything is decreed and commanded by according to Allah's will or God's will, saying nothing happens without Him knowing and without Him deciding things. It is a highly controversial debate, though. So how much free will do we get? How much destiny? How much of our destiny is controlled? It's a bit a heated topic. I wouldn't even discuss it because I'm not even knowledgeable enough to go over it. But yeah, I mean, maybe he did something that God didn't like.
Didn't want to go back to Delhi and explain his
Or
failure.
has plans to do something else for him. For example, I applied to be intern in a tech company, and I wasn't accepted. So consequently, I went to my mosque and found the religious study thing, and I've been studying there. So I guess God makes a path. Makes a
To the Sultan's execution elephants. At first, he tried to get a job with another Indian sultan.
I mean, personally, I think free will does not exist, but it doesn't matter because it feels like it does. That's literally what Islam says, kind of. It's like touchy subject.
Even fighting in an amphibious assault to prove himself worthy of employment. But that didn't work out, and Ibn Battuta instead snuck off with a nebulous plan to just go to China. Fulfill as much of his old mission as possible. In doing so, he of course would take the most out-of-the-way route possible through the Maldive Islands. But the local Muslim authorities there needed a chief judge, and they were applying him with gifts, so, old habits die hard. He agreed to stay and take the job, under a few conditions. First, he got a ton of treasure, making him rich again.
Yeah.
Second, he married into the royal family. And
Wow.
third, he didn't want to walk anywhere. Yeah, he had to be carried on a litter.
No way. That's kind of arrogant. Okay, maybe it's that's why God didn't like him. That kind of arrogance. Nah. In Islam, it's not like sinful to be arrogant and stuff like that. It's just that it's disliked. So usually religious scholars, when they don't they consider dislike things being forbidden to themselves. Yeah, at this point he's starting to flex. But,
Like
something
king,
bad might happen.
They agreed, and he spent 9 months meting out punishments under religious law, doling out floggings for failing to attend mosque, sentencing thieves to
That
have
was the
their
thing.
hands cut off, and, unsuccessfully, trying to convince the island's women to stop going around topless. He married 3 more times, finding that the island's cowrie shell dowries were cheap and divorce simple. Indeed, it was common at this time for merchants to get temporarily married during these short stays. But his high living gained him enemies, and he fled the Maldives with his new fortune, only to tarry on a neighboring island just long enough to get married and divorced twice more. Then at last,
Twice? Oh my god. That's crazy.
he took his replenished treasury and toured Sri Lanka
I don't know. That's my sister. Make noise if you can hear
before
that.
hiring yet another ship to take him to China. A ship which was attacked by pirates, who once again took everything he owned.
Damn.
I don't think the universe liked Ibn Battuta being rich. But finally, his luck changed. He then got passage to the court of the Muslim Sultan, who ruled the northern tip of Sumatra.
Catch a break, yeah.
And that little side trip you can hear about over in our Majapahit series, because this guy gets around. When he departed, he at last left behind the Islamic world, the last kingdom he would visit, ruled by a Muslim. He stopped in the kingdom of Champa.
Wow, like the Islamic world expanded a lot. The only reason, other than conquest, there's three ways. I can't. Maybe there's others. I can't really think about them. Three ways where countries would become Muslim. One through conquest, where they would conquer the country, and slowly over time they would, because there's no such you're not allowed to force convert someone to become a Muslim, and they would from top down they would slowly become Muslim, through trade. The Indonesia and Malaysia, they became Muslim through trade, and third was through religious scholars and religious people would go out to the countries, to pagan countries or whatever, and convert them to Islam, and then they would, from bottom up, they would convert.
Current day Vietnam, and visited a third great kingdom, that of the warrior queen Udura, that may have been in either the Philippines or Java.
Huh?
Udura,
How do you make that
tall,
mistake?
adorned with gold and jewels, her hair flowing long, gave Ibn Battuta gifts and showed him the powerful fleet she used to battle Chinese forces.
Wow.
Her greatest ambition, she told him, was to lead an expedition to India, so she pumped him for information about his time there. Waving goodbye, she put him on a ship to China, and at long last, he arrived at his objective, the land of the Mongol Yuan emperors, where even beggars wore silk, a place so alien he could barely understand it. And haunting his steps came a new horror, the Black Plague. Legendary.
Okay, I think this is the final video.
1346, Xuanzhou, China. Ibn Battuta found China a land of wonders, an upside-down place where people used paper instead of coin, and even beggars wore silk. China was beautiful, he wrote, but it did not please me.
Yeah,
because while Ibn Battuta had traveled widely, most of the communities he visited were Muslim or Muslim-ruled, and he rarely ventured outside that bubble. Where minority religions existed, they were at least other monotheists, like Christians or Jews. The Chinese, by contrast, were polytheistic and worshipped what Ibn Battuta considered idols. Confucian scholars were dismissive of Islam, and the population ate pork and cremated their dead. This disturbed me so much, he wrote, that
that's all a big no-no in Islam. No, 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 no. No.
Stayed indoors most of the time, and only went out when necessary. During my stay in China, whenever I saw Muslims, I always felt as though I were meeting my own family and close kinsmen. Perhaps it was time to go home. But when he did so, death followed him.
I love that intro.
Ibn Battuta didn't have to look far to find other Muslims in Yuan, China. Indeed, for over a century, the Mongol Yuan had kept an open door.
My dad's calling me. Be right back. I just had a quick call with my dad.
Door policy that invited foreigners to settle and form trading villages. While in these Islamic enclaves, he even ran into other scholars he'd met during his travels. But
yeah, you can eat pork. If you're gonna die and you're starving and there's no other food, you can eat pork or drink alcohol. But that's out of bare necessity to live.
Had kept an open door policy that invited foreigners to settle and form trading villages. While in these Islamic enclaves, he even ran into other scholars he'd met during his travels. Because as you've probably understood by now, Ibn Battuta was not an explorer. During his travels, he'd made his way along well-known pilgrimage and trade routes. The Mongol conquest and the peace and security that they'd created had fostered an unprecedented network of overland and maritime trade routes. Few people traveled to the extent that Ibn Battuta did, but he was far from the only person to journey from Africa to East Asia. In China, he met Syrians, Egyptians, and even a man who grew up 40 miles from him back in Morocco.
Wow.
Because you see, the world of the mid-14th century was an interconnected world, one where goods and people could go from one side of Africa and Eurasia to the other. And that would ultimately destroy this period of peace and interchange. Because in Central Asia, a terrible disease was emerging.
The Black Death.
A disease that caused painful buboes on the body, extreme headaches, and delirium. An even more aggressive form, the airborne pneumatic variety, caused victims to cough blood and killed within hours. It was a disease born by flu.
Wonder how much money he has lost by now. Yeah, that's crazy. It is. And it's funny because whenever he does something like that other people view as arrogant or dislike, that's when he usually loses the money. And it's so funny because of that. I mean, yeah.
Fleas. Fleas that lived on rats. An animal that liked to infest ships or stow away on caravans and wagons. In other words, an insect that infested all modes of transport Ibn Battuta had taken on his long road. When he boarded his ship back to India, he had no idea that he was seeing the last days of Yuan China. Bubonic plague would lead to the dynasty's collapse and sow chaos on the peaceful trade roads of the four Mongol kingdoms.
Damn.
Indeed, Ibn Battuta would begin to see that collapse himself. He retraced his route to India.
Correlation to karma? I mean, yeah, because there's good and bad. And sorry for that. That's my cousins. My little cousins. They're like 6 to 8 years old. They're visiting my sister. They're friends. So yeah, some sort of related correlation karma, but I feel like karma is like because every religion has something like that, good or bad. That's one of the reasons why religion exists, to differentiate good and bad, to set morals and standards. So, I feel like it's not limited to Buddhism, but Buddhism is an example of that. So does Islam has yeah, everyone has a version of that. I feel like because if you were going to a religious Muslim, he would be insulted by comparing Islam to Buddhism or Hinduism, a pagan religion, and relating to karma. Be like, hey, don't do that.
India and considered
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Be right back. I'm back, but like every religious story has to like something about a arrogant man getting put into this place. Yeah, that's always the case. It's because everyone gets arrogant. It's just how many levels of arrogance you have. Oh, of course. Be right back. Oh my god. So annoying. It's right when, because I started streaming when I was home alone, and now I'm not anymore. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to end my stream soon.
Going back
I just
to
gotta
Delhi,
finish this video.
but
I
word
might
reached
not
him that
be
the
able to.
Sultanate was tearing itself apart, and Ibn Battuta was worried that the Sultan would execute him for his failed mission. So he made another plan. A little, what is that thing called? Oh yeah,
Side trip.
a side trip to Mecca to make the Hajj one last time. But by the time he made it to the Arabian Peninsula, the pilgrimage season had ended. He would need to wait a year before it started again. So, rather than just hang out, he took another separate side trip. A side trip. Revisiting Persia, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt to see how things had changed in the time he'd been away. And he was shocked at what he found. The great Ilkhan, the man he'd traveled with, was dead, likely from plague. He'd left an empty throne, several ongoing wars, and his Mongol and Turkish generals were ripping the land apart in a series of succession conflicts. It was the first dark cloud in what would be a storm of sadness. He arrived in Damascus to find that the son he'd left behind, with one of his many ex-wives, had died in childhood. And a separate message told him that his father had passed away 15 years before.
Oh,
Saddened,
snap.
he took a trip to Aleppo. But as he traveled, a great curtain was being pulled across Syria. The Black Plague descended on the Middle East, chasing him on the road. He fled back to Damascus, but found the oasis city ground to a halt, with 2,000 dying every day and the populace in terror. As in Europe, the Islamic world believed the disease came from a religious rather than medical source. But while Christian Europe interpreted it as punishment for human sin and greeted the plague with apocalyptic sermons, self-flagellation, and massacres of their Jewish neighbors, Islam...
Self-flagellation means hitting yourself. Hurting yourself. They whip themselves, basically. And persecution of Jews, wow.
Islamic cities looked on it as a manifestation of the divine will. To them, it was an aspect of God's unknowable plan that must simply be endured with humility.
Yeah, that's part of Qadr, destiny of God. So if a national event happens, they say, for Muslims, we should be able to say, this was caused by God, and intentions could be punishing us, could be anything. We do not know, as God is uncomprehensive. We cannot know his intentions, and we do have to endure it. And they view it as a test, test for the religion. Be like, hey, we got to endure this test so that we get a stronger belief in Islam.
Ibn Battuta saw the residents of Damascus fast for 3 days, followed by a packed day of prayer and supplication in the mosque. Afterward,
Muslims didn't get it as bad as Christians in Europe, because for part of our prayers, we're supposed to do a purification wash before prayers, so that we're clean when we pray. So I feel like that kind of hygiene helped combat. While the Christians, at one point, the Pope said that bathing was a heresy, and basically personal hygiene was abolished in essence. So they were hit a lot worse than Muslims in the Middle East and Muslims in general.
Ethnic populace paraded through the city streets together, holding aloft copies of their holy texts. Muslims carried the Quran, Christians the Bible, and Jews the Torah, all with tears, imploring their God to stop the suffering.
Yeah.
Damascus would lose more than 30,000 citizens to the disease.
Wow.
Its streets choked with funeral parades, corpses left uncovered.
30,000 is a lot for that time, because at this time, the population was less than 1 billion. There wasn't even 1 billion people in the world at this time.
Due to the city running out of burial.
Yeah, actually, maybe let me fact check that. Population of Earth in the 14th century. 380 million. That's almost the population of the United States right currently, which is 330 million. That's crazy.
Shrouds. Ibn Battuta fled to Cairo, passing empty villages and bodies along the road. And when he arrived, he found the great city, with a population of 500,000, deserted by its leaders and losing 24,000 residents each day.
Wow.
Plague would eventually kill 200,000, including most of the army officers, sending the Mamluk Sultanate into decline. But in 1348, the worst year of the plague, Ibn Battuta made it to Mecca and fulfilled his goal of making the Hajj one last time. It must have made him think of his first pilgrimage when he left.
According to Islam, for one of the 5 pillars is to do the Hajj or a Hajj. At least once in life, if you can do it. If you're too sick or you can't afford to do it, then you don't need to. So it's optional, but it's mandatory if you are able to do it. The fact that he did it 4 times is amazing.
left Tangier at the age of 21, freshly graduated and never having left home. Now, he was a 45-year-old man. I was moved by memories of my homeland, he wrote. Affection for my family and dear friends who drew me toward my land, which in my opinion was better than any other country. Yet when he arrived home in Tangier, he found his mother had died of plague as well. And days later, he was on the road again. At a loss for what to do, he volunteered as a soldier to defend the Rock of Gibraltar from a Spanish siege, but arrived to find the battle already over. Instead, he toured Muslim Spain before returning home. But that
Spain
was
was
not
on
the end of
Spain at one point used to be majority Muslim for almost 700 years. It's crazy.
his journey. The Sultan of Morocco, hearing of his...
You're gonna sleep out. Good night. Have a good nap. I don't know. It's daytime for me. Bright day, middle of the day. 5:40 for me. So have a good one.
his voyages, appointed him ambassador to the
I'm about to end
Golden
my stream
Empire
anyways.
of Mali. Though that's a tale you'll have to hear about over in our Empire of Mali series. Because this dude went...
Oh, you're from Finland? Damn, 1 a.m. here. Oh, wow. Hi, from Finland. I have a friend from Finland. He's from Helsinki or something like that. Helsinki? Was it Helsinki? Yeah, Helsinki. Yeah. You're from there too? That's cool. I used to play Minecraft with him.
everywhere. And when he returned, the Sultan gave Ibn Battuta...
I was surprised because people in Finland know Swedish and Norwegian or at the same time and English, which is crazy.
a new command
Apparently,
to dictate
it's apparently common. That's what he told me.
his story to the poet Ibn Battuta, so that there could be a record of all he saw in the Muslim world. The result was not a perfect book. Ibn Battuta worked from memory, and as a result, got details
That's crazy. I wish I was bilingual like that.
wrong, misremembered dates, and mixed up some events. Someone, either Ibn Battuta himself or Ibn Battuta, decided to fill in the blanks by copying sections of other travel books,
But good night. Have a good one.
even inventing some journeys so the book would be a full compendium of the whole Muslim world. For instance, Ibn Battuta likely never made it out of southern China, nor did he travel far north into Russia as the book claims. And Rob will talk about how we know that in our Lives episode. But despite all these issues, The Travels is an extraordinary document. One that, despite its contradictions, exaggerations, and occasionally confused timelines, gives historians an unprecedented look at the Muslim world of the 14th century and how its trade networks operated. Given that, it's almost anticlimactic to say that when they were originally published, they received little attention. In fact, Ibn
I wonder why that happens a lot. Van Gogh, when he was an artist, painter, he made a bunch of paintings, never popular, but then after he died, he became popular. I wonder why that happens. It's crazy.
Battuta's fellow judges often called him an uneducated liar. We know almost nothing about the rest of his life, only that he likely settled down as a mid-level Qadi, probably married again if precedent had anything to say about it, and died without fanfare. It's ironic then that today, Ibn Battuta's personal fame eclipses any of the rulers and even some of the kingdoms he visited. While few people around the world have heard of the Ilkhanate or Mohammed Tughlaq, Ibn Battuta's life has been the subject of television dramas, movies, and even video games.
Oh, really? I gotta watch those then.
You can visit Ibn Battuta Mall in Dubai, where the different sections
I used to live in UAE, Sharjah, and I visited Dubai too.
are themed to his journeys. Fly into Tangier, and you'll land in Ibn Battuta Airport. Eat at Ibn Battuta restaurants, visit an Ibn Battuta festival,
Wow.
and even see an unmarked tomb that's said to be his final resting place. He even has a crater on the moon.
That's cool. That's cool.
I have indeed. Praise be to God, attained my desire in this world, he wrote, which was to travel through the earth. And I have attained in this respect what no other person has attained to my knowledge. Happy travels, friends. See you next time. Legendary thanks to M.I.T.Z on Turk.
Okay. I think this is where I'm going to end my stream. Thanks for stopping by, especially Javelin. Really appreciate your support for stopping by my stream. Hope you have a good night. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on my YouTube channel. Make sure you follow my Twitch, subreddit, all my socials. You'll see in the description, and if you're on my YouTube, which you're probably going to watch on my YouTube. And yeah, have a good one. Thank you. Thank you very much.